As Alex said, my name is Tristan, and what I want to talk about tonight is my faith and why I believe it's so important for young people to have a very strong faith, especially as you're getting towards perhaps the end of high school, as you're picking colleges, choosing what you're going to do with the rest of your life. There's some very big questions that you have to answer, and there's some very important things that you have to determine as you become who you're about to be for the rest of your life. And I think that having a strong foundation and having a strong faith when you're finally going to leave your parents and go out into the world is the most important thing, because it's going to determine the rest of your life and how you live your life and what you're going to do to glorify the kingdom of heaven. So me personally, I believe that I have a very strong faith, and my personal beliefs include the belief that Jesus Christ came and he died for us and he took away the sins of the world, and that I believe through doing that I was able to have a close personal relationship with him that will last for eternity, especially when I get to go to heaven and party with him forever. So that's definitely the core of my beliefs, and I believe that, and I have a core belief in that. I believe it to be true completely because I don't just have my faith, but I also believe that there is lots of evidence to support that the belief that Jesus Christ came and he died, and he wasn't just a man, he wasn't just a liar or a lunatic, but he was actually God in human form. And a lot of that to the world seems like it requires a lot of faith to believe that God exists and that he's out there, and the whole world seems to be against the idea of God now. A lot of people are trying to venture away from that type of belief because they don't want to look at the world in that way. They don't want to be held accountable for perhaps their actions, and they don't want to believe in a God because they say that they don't see the evidence for God like that. And they say it requires so much faith to believe in God. And for me personally, my faith comes from the fact that I believe that it takes more faith to be an atheist. I personally don't have enough faith to not believe in God. And one of the reasons for that is that I think when I hear the arguments for there's no God, or when I talk to people, my professors at college, or people in my life who say, you believe in God? Like, how do you know he's there? And I think it's easy to see God's love and God's character in our world, but I think it takes more faith to believe in a world that was randomly generated, that appeared out of nowhere. Our complex universe, the ability that humans are alive and able to have complicated thoughts and to be held accountable for our actions and have morals and to feel emotions such as guilt and love. Those kinds of things, I think, are too complicated to be completely random. I think it requires too much faith to believe that those things just came out of nowhere. The world generated itself. And that's a big part of my faith, is because my relationship with God is not just determined by what I believe to be a personal relationship with him, but it's through the fact that I know that God is there, and when I talk to God, when I pray with him, when I see God's actions in my life, when I talk to God, sometimes I'm asking him for stuff, sometimes I want something out of life from him, and sometimes I'm just wanting to communicate with God because I need to have some type of closure or peace. And I know he's out there listening, and I believe he's out there listening because my faith allows me, my connection with God allows me to feel that God is there. And it's not simply because of something that I've been taught. It's something that I've, thought about myself, that I've determined myself. I don't simply want to take my parents' beliefs and my parents' opinions when I go out into the world, when I'm out talking to people, because that's exactly the kind of thing that the people in the world are trying to do if they're trying to turn you away from God, is they want to use every possible source that they can to make it so that God isn't reasonable, God isn't something that you want to be believing in because it's uncool or it's not supported by evidence, or that it's simply the idea that God could appear and he controls the world, that he lets horrible things happen and so therefore he doesn't exist at all. Those are the kind of things that people want to implant in the next generation. They want to get us even further away from God. We're in a country right now, it's like there's a lot of issues in the world. There's a lot of things that seem to point away from God, and a lot of people who are choosing exactly what they want to do and not being held not holding themselves accountable to their actions or thinking on a moral level of what God wants for the betterment of humanity, for what God planned for us. And so I believe that when you go out into the world, you need to have a strong foundation to be able to maintain your faith for the rest of your life. And that's something that I think that I've come to determine myself, is because I have faith that God exists. And I'm not simply just taking what my parents believe. I need to be able to believe it for myself. And a couple reasons I believe that for myself is what I was talking about, starting with evidence. I believe there's a lot of evidence for the existence of God. And I think some aspects of God do require faith. I think faith is an immense part of your relationship with God. But I think it makes it a lot easier that God left us a lot of evidence to believe what we need to believe about God. And that starts with the Bible. God left us a lot of evidence for that the events in the Bible actually happen and that they are actually true. And he left us a lot of writers and a lot of non-Christian people who documented the events of the Bible so that we could find those documents thousands of years later and see that the events actually happened. They weren't simply something that people wrote about or people came up with and joined those things together to create a substantial religion that people were being able to get something out of, but it was actually a tangible thing those are tangible things that happened. The miracles that God performed are things that I believe happened. And when you read the Bible, we can't know for 100%. We can't know without a doubt right now that those types of things, that the miracles God created, that they actually happen. They require a little faith. And I think it's a lot easier to have that faith, to believe that the miracles and the things that God happened or that occurred in the Bible are true because they're backed up by history. And there's a lot of evidence going into the authenticity of the Bible. The Bible is the most historically documented book in existence. But the people seem to doubt it. People look at the Bible and they compare it to other historical documents and they say, no, the Bible's not accurate. There's just not enough evidence to support it. But compared to certain other books that people take without a doubt, if you're talking about Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, that's a book that has historical events in it, even though it's made up and it was generated. It was written by an author and it's fictitious events. It also has real historical events in it. And it has close to about 500 historical documents collaborating what it says that go with its historical events. And people take that without a doubt that it exists. But then people will deny that the events of the Bible happened. And the Bible has close to almost 25,000 historical documents that were written by people, a lot of them non-Christians, that authenticate what happened in the Bible actually existed. And so there's a lot of evidence for the Bible, first of all. And then the second of all, there's a lot of evidence for the creation. There's a lot of evidence for how the beginning of the world started. And a lot of colleges and all the schools today in the world are going to teach that we came from a random thought, or we came from random cells, and that we evolved from animals and from other things, and it was simply a matter of science and a matter of time that created our complex universe. And that's what the world wants you to believe. And I simply don't have enough faith to believe that. First of all, because all the research I've done, I don't see the scientific evidence for that. But also, I don't see that God would have created the world in that manner. God created us. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. One funny analogy to me is that a lot of people will say, well, the Big Bang Theory that scientists talk about, that the universe exploded and it was an explosion of energy and matter, that they say that happened. We see evidence of the universe exploding into being to create this expansive, endless universe. And I say, well, that sounds a lot like when God said, let there be light. It really does make sense, because certain things that people take about the Bible and take about what they see in our world, they assume automatically that it doesn't fit with the Bible. But it does in a lot of cases. The Bible is not a science book. God did not leave us the Bible for science. But everything it says about science is accurate from what we determine, from what we see from unbiased sources, unbiased scientists who research the world. So I believe there is a lot of evidence for the Bible and for creation, and that makes it easier to believe in a God, that he's out there and he's existing and he's moving in this world. And that's why I personally believe that it doesn't take as much faith to believe in God as it does to not believe that he exists at all, that there's a powerful being out there who has an influence in the universe. And finally, I believe that it doesn't take I believe that having faith is an essential part of who you are, because having a faith is part of our relationship with God. We want to have a strong relationship with God, because when we go out into the world and we're being told by people, and we're being criticized by people that we aren't important, and that what the ideas that we have don't fit with what's accurate, that kind of relationship is just hocus pocus. It's just made up. It's not something that we can actually have a tangible belief in. You have to find something that is going to fit with your belief. You have to understand. You have to have faith that it exists, and the belief in God does require a little bit of faith. Everything said takes a little bit of faith. But if you have that faith with God, if you are constantly going to church, if you're talking with people about your faith, if you're asking questions, if you're pushing yourself to find out where your doubts are, those kinds of things are going to help you create a stronger faith. So that when you're going out and you no longer have your parents there to support you or to answer all your questions, or your youth leaders or your pastors or priests there, priests to answer your questions, you can find the answers yourself. You can believe what you believe for a reason. And those are all the reasons why I think that having a faith is a really strong part of who you are as a Christian, and why having a personal relationship with God does require a little faith, but ultimately it's harder to not believe in God.
And we have a wonderful teacher too.